Welcome back to this week's episode of the Lady Landlords Podcast. I am your host, Becky Nova, and today we're actually talking about one of my favorite topics. Now, this topic I see all day long in the Lady Landlords Facebook group. This is probably the topic that we talk about most within the group. This really keeps the amount of posts that we see coming in day after day after day going. And want to know what that topic is? Boundaries with tenants. All right. So this clearly is the crux of being a lady landlord, is how we are managing our tenants and what those conversations and what that relationship looks like. But I said this in a training that we did in the Lady Landlords Facebook group a couple of weeks ago, where I really talked about, at the end of the day, even though there's 50,000 women in the Lady Landlords Facebook group, we don't actually want to be landlords. We are in this. We are in real estate investing for the freedom. We want to be able to do this, to get out of the shackles of our 9-to-5 jobs, to be able to travel the way that we want, live our lives the way that we want, pursue our passions the way that we want, be there for our family and friends, be there for ourselves. All of those different things are the result of what we can have when we are successful landlords. But if you are saying, I'd love to do all those things, but I get this phone call and then this happens, and then I got to figure out what to do with this, and then how do I respond to that, and how is that managed? And that whole tenant management bubble is really what keeps so many lady landlords stuck in really leaving one day job and going and finding another, or then feeling that this is very overwhelming, or that they're not enjoying this. And honestly, it really comes down to boundaries. Now, I'm going to get into a couple different tips for you in boundaries, but one of the reasons why I think this is so important is because we need to win back our time, okay? This is absolutely something that I struggle with. This is, I think everybody does, but really is saying, how can I accomplish all the things that I really want to do in the limited amount of time that I really have? I actually went so far to hire a time coach. Now, this was a couple of years ago. I actually hired somebody. I paid thousands of dollars to have somebody really look at my schedule, look at all the things that I was hoping to accomplish between what my gym schedule was, what my family schedule was. I play softball. I make sure to practice my Spanish and improve my language skills. I need free time. I need business time. And this was actually back still when I was working in a W-2 environment, in addition to having my rental properties and still making sure that I even was able to fit in time with my husband. All of those different things, it was very difficult on my calendar to do. So I remember I found this coach and really thought that would be such a great idea to have somebody just be able to assess and look over everything that I have. Now, spoiler alert, it was actually horrible. Thankfully, I was able to get back almost all of my money, thank God, because it just was not the agreement that we did. Interestingly enough, part of the problem was that the time coach felt that there were actually too many things that I was trying to do in my schedule. And I was like, no, these are all the things that are important to me. And the amount that I like to travel is also just as important to me. So we have to make these things fit. Luckily, I was able to do that. Thankfully, real estate investing really helped because I was able to leave my 9-to-5, which clearly cleared up a lot of my day-to-day and a lot of my schedule there. And that was something that I knew that I had to really work hard at to be able to leave that. But the one thing that time coach was worth, that I do feel actually is something that's really kept with me all that time. I'm actually going to kind of give you guys that tip for free. But one of the things that we really talked about was how you want to make sure that you're going through your day making the least amount of decisions possible. The more decisions you have to make, the more brain power you have to use, the more mental energy, the more things that you actually have to kind of process within your brain. And I don't know about anybody else, but I will speak for me. Decision making can be really annoying and frustrating. So if every single day just going through that process of okay, what do I want to wear today? Am I wearing this color? Am I wearing these pants? Am I wearing this dress? What is that going to look like? Okay, now those are already a bunch of decisions that I have to make just to even get myself dressed. What am I eating for breakfast now? Should I make this? Should I make this? Should I make this? Should I eat out? Should I purchase this here? All of those little things, when you're trying to make those decisions in the actual moment, when you add all those things up, you're making thousands and thousands of decisions throughout the whole day. You get caught up. I don't know about anybody else, but this is me. I get really caught up a lot on what I want to order off a menu or what I want to eat. That becomes very difficult because not only now am I thinking about the decision before I even got there, but now that I made my decision, now I'm sitting there, I'm well, was it the right decision? I'll tell you right now, my husband always orders the right thing, and I feel like I always order the wrong thing. But I always I now have to like regret that and replay my decision. And that was something that I realized I really had to get out of. I had to get to a place where I can really go and say, these are just standardized. And then therefore I can not only get my energy back, but I can actually get my time back. So here are a couple ways of how we can apply that same principle to landlording, which will give you back hours in your day. So one thing that we always want to start with is establishing the communication pathways. Okay. This really comes in the form of your lease. In your lease, you should really lay out as much as you possibly can up front, right? There's always going to be situations that we're just not going to be able to predict. Trust me, I update my lease all the time with all these things that I never thought that I would have to tell adults. But I've learned in this industry, you do. But we can't have a 100-page lease. But really making it very clear what happens in certain situations, how those communication pathways really take place is very helpful. For example, tenants do not message me on my phone. They do not, okay? That is something that they get my phone number for emergencies only, and then therefore, if it's an emergency, and I define what that emergency is. Basically, if you had to call 911 first, then you can call me after. Okay. But otherwise, if you weren't calling 911, chances are it's probably not going to be like an emergency in this situation, right? In that case, then you're also not going to text me. Okay. It's kind of like sending like a breakup text. You're not really going to like send your landlord a text being like, hey, by the way, the house burned down. Police are here, fire department's here right now. That's probably not what you're going to send in a text. That should really be something that you would say over a phone call. So in that sense, I make it very clear what that's supposed to look like, in what respects that you're supposed to be able to call me and reach out in that way, which also I am using a Google Voice phone number instead of my own personal phone number. So in that way, that also goes into a little bit of a bucket. I know when that rings through that there better be a problem on the other side of that phone if I am now answering that. But I then put for anything that's not that emergency, if you did not have to call 911, I make sure that that goes to a segmented bucket. Okay, that in the sense of all other maintenance requests, concerns, questions, anything like that goes to another space that then I get to control when I am checking that, how I respond. And I make sure that that is very clear that I will be responding within 24 hours during business days and business times. And I define that for my tenants. The most that I can continue to lay out for them and have them understand expectations, the less burden it's going to have on me. So for example, if now all of a sudden a tenant sends something and it's 8 o'clock on like a Friday night, they will understand that one, that's after what I consider then my business hours. And also that those non-emergency items are not things that I'm checking on the weekend. So therefore my brain doesn't have to spend any energy there because those tenants have expectations of when I will respond back. They know which communication pathway to use to speak to me for different things. But that allows me to really be present where I am. I'm now either present landlord, and now I have to respond back to people's requests and their messages for non-emergency situations, or I get to actually do the thing that I want to do, the reason I got into real estating at all, and I can just focus simply in that space. Next way to really create boundaries and to really start to lessen the amount of decisions that we have to make is to start thinking about those costs that tend to pop up within our space as a landlord. What I mean by that is a lot of times, and you'll see this a lot in the Lady Landlords Facebook group, that we talk about, well, this broke. Is that on me? Is that on the tenant? Well, then this broke, or this got scratched, or this needed to be replaced. And we go back and forth with this, like, whose responsibility is it? Well, listen, people, adults, should absolutely be held to their responsibilities, their conditions, right? But there is a certain space where I've just kind of decided, here is the amount of money that I feel comfortable where I'm actually going to spend the energy to think about those things. I have good tenants. I've had tenants that have been with me now for years. Do we still have an occasional tenant or two coming in that's causing some problems? Yeah, but we swap them out. We get new tenants that are coming in that are better tenants. And when we have those good tenants there and we have that relationship with them and we want them to stay longer term, because longer term is going to be best for me from a cash flow perspective and also a boundary perspective. But to have those great tenants continue to stay with me to help ensure that I can have that cash flow coming in, but also understand that my tenant management is going to stay at that minimum. There is a decision that I'm going to make saying, hey, I'm not going to go with this back and forth and possibly lose a great tenant because there's this problem with a closet rod that'll cost me 20 bucks. Or because there is this scratch over here that I can really just kind of throw some paint on and I can really do it myself and kind of fix that. Now, I'm clearly talking about little things. I am not talking about gross negligence. I am not talking about, matchbox cars being flushed down a toilet that now has disrupted a plumbing system in all 4 floors of my multifamily. That's going to cost me thousands of dollars in plumber's fees and all those types of things. No, no, no. Those are being billed to the appropriate place. But there's just that space of kind of saying, where am I picking my battles? What's worth it to me or not? And what I think is really cool about this is that what you're going to say to that is going to be very different than what I would. Okay. For example, you might hear me say that and you're like, no way. There is no way that I would come $20 out of my pocket unless I am legally responsible and understand that it was completely my fault and the structural integrity of the closet rod. And I'm not going to do that. Right. That might be what you're saying right now, and that might be okay. And you're going to say, this is the way that I'm going to landlord, and that's perfectly okay. There's going to be some other people that are going to say, you know what, the back and forth with the tenant, that's actually not something that I would care about for $100, right? And everybody else is going to kind of fall in between. Now, listen, we are all here to make money with this. We all need to understand and respect our local and federal laws. So we do have to understand that. But here I'm talking about those smaller arbitrary things that are really not as black and white. And like I said, I see these posts all day long, and we go back ad nauseum just saying like, well, I would have done this and I would have done this. And sometimes, to be honest, I think it's just not worth it. And I think that's something that each of us as a lady landlord really get to decide at what point is this something that I'm going to push or fight further for? And at what point am I going to say, you know what, enough's enough. This is something that I'm going to be okay with this time. Not saying it even has to be every time, but really creating those cost barriers is going to help lessen the amount of energy that you're putting into that decision making, those awkward conversation with tenants, any type of rebuttal or response. And then also it's going to make probably that next decision a little bit easier. Because usually if I say to a tenant like, hey, I got it, we'll get you the new closet rod, I can almost guarantee you that the next time they're going to come to me and say, hey, I had this problem. Don't worry, I just grabbed this thing from Amazon, or I stopped at Home Depot and picked it up. Don't worry, it was only a couple of bucks. You're going to start to really have that relationship and that reciprocity. And that's going to be really great for all those little things that honestly don't make too much of a difference in the end. All right. Now, third tip I have with you for boundaries is also deciding what type of landlord you want to be. And this really comes to the idea of how strict you want to be. I know that there are absolutely landlords that are saying, I will never communicate with my tenants. I would never leave them a welcome basket. I'm never going to send them a holiday card or any of those types of things, compared to other people that are going to say, you know what, this is something that I'd really like to do. And that's how I want to manage my business. And that's how I want to run those things. And once again, we are each in this for individual reasons. We are each in this for our own set of goals that are really unique to us. And I think coming up with what that's going to look like is going to help you be able to evaluate how to respond to a decision much faster. And then therefore, once again, not having to expend all this energy going by. What I mean by that is if there was a problem that a tenant came to you with, if you're saying, hey, I am going to be the strict, tough tenant, tough landlord that is going to follow everything on my lease to an absolute T, that's great. Now you know that. Now there's no decision making of, well, should I do this or should I respond back this way, or hey, how can I handle this in a different fashion? You're saying, no, this is in my lease, it's black and white. That's absolutely it. That's how we're following it. If you're going to be more on the lenient side, then that's also something that you're going to say and be okay with understanding that these are now things that you're going to handle on a case-by-case basis, right? And just like I mentioned in my last cost barriers boundary setting, you get to do the same thing here where you really get to say, this is how I'm going to landlord. This is going to be the lens that I'm going to make all decisions of being a landlord with. And I think once you understand what that setting looks like, once you already have that in place, you really are able to move forward, and you're going to be spending less time making decisions, less time reevaluating those decisions. And that in turn is going to give you more energy to go out there and live your life the way that you want to see it as a lady landlord. So thank you very much. I hope you got some good tips here about setting boundaries with tenants and really decreasing your time management. Please make sure to hit that subscribe button so you do not miss the next episode of the Lady Landlords Podcast. We release new episodes every single Tuesday. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please do make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Leaving 5-star reviews actually help other women be able to find our podcast and get the help that they need growing their rental portfolios. So if you've enjoyed the podcast, please do make sure to pay that forward to another lady landlord out there. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next Tuesday for the next episode of the Lady Landlords Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Lady Landlords Podcast. If you're feeling stuck in your real estate investing journey, visit lady-landlord.com to book a 15-minute orientation call with me and see if you're ready to join our mentorship program. Or you can subscribe to our newsletter and join our Facebook group for exclusive real estate investing tips and offers. Invest with confidence. Become a Lady Landlord today.